Democratic Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee has had newfound respect for Republicans like New Republicans like Mitt Romney, Liz Cheney, and also former President George W. Bush. So she wrote an op-ed about her newfound respect because of the things that have been happening within the Republican Party and some of their pushbacks. Let's go to her opinion piece in CNN. She is saying all three of them that I just mentioned have repeatedly rejected and denounced publicly, unequivocally, and fiercely the Republican-driven big lie that the 2020 presidential election was stolen from former President Donald Trump. Together, Cheney, Romney, and Bush are modern-day profiles in courage, embodying former President John F. Kennedy's dictum that sometimes party loyalty demands too much. She continued to say, now some might think it surprising for a member of an opposing party to go against the convention of non-interference when one's adversary is in the process of inflicting harm upon itself. But I've chosen to ignore this convention because I am a firm believer in the promise of a more perfect union. And I believe in America and its future. Lastly, she finishes off by saying, our children listen to and absorb what we say and do. We cannot let them see the brutalization of voices that are telling the truth about January 6th and the Capitol on the citadel of democracy, the US Capitol, without defending those voices. I believe these Republican leaders are patriots, and I join them in my affection for the written values of this nation. That's by Sheila Jackson Lee, Representative Jackson Lee, and decided to, well, she wanted to point out the three or the few individuals in the Republican Party that are pushing back. We all know that Liz Cheney's getting shoved out, potentially gonna get shoved out next week. George W. Bush has been speaking out, and of course Mitt Romney, who's been booed, who's also had had some points when his state party was trying to censor him and make sure he didn't have anything else to say. So is this a good political move? But actually, my first thought was, is it a political move or is it just a straight from the heart? Is this something that's gonna help promote herself or make herself look more like a middle of the road person? Or even when she's doing things, because she called herself a progressive multiple times at the beginning of that piece. So as a progressive that's saying the right thing, because by the way, these three have been saying correct things, but what does it do here to take out an opinion piece to make sure that you voice those opinions to the point where you call them patriots and maybe forgetting the things that they do that aren't very patriotic?
Yeah, I got mixed feelings about this. On the one hand, I do think that it took courage for Romney and Liz Cheney to say what they've said and to vote to impeach Donald Trump. George Bush he's retired from politics, so that's less of an issue of courage. And remember, George Bush despises Donald Trump partly because of what he did to his brother Jeb Bush. And what he said about George Bush over and over again. Trump, he insults everyone endlessly, including George Bush. So it's doesn't take much courage on Bush's part to come out against Donald Trump. So I'm giving you that context, but I want to encourage people to have political courage. I also want Democrats to have political courage. That would be wonderful in opposing their own corporate side. But on the other hand, why are Democrats constantly trying to help Republicans? Right? Nancy Pelosi the other day said, I want the Republican Party to be stronger. Why? They're your opponents and they're terrible people, right? I don't want them to be stronger. I want them to be pathetically weak. And I want us to roll over them because we have the better policies. And this isn't a game where you're doing good sportsmanship. Politics is about real people's lives. It affects their wages, their health care, their life, etc. So if they have the wrong policies, they're gonna get more people killed. They're gonna ruin people's lives. It's imperative that you fight them super hard and you beat them. So, and of course, Joe Biden can't stop complimenting Republicans. Oh, I know the Republican Party's great. I know they're gonna come back to their senses. I know the fever's gonna break my Republican friends. I love them so much. Why do you constantly help the other side? What is wrong with you people? Whereas, you remember all those Republicans writing op-eds about how much they love Democrats. Oh, right, none, none whatsoever.
No, of course, they never do that. There's no reason for us to either. It's like this article, the very basic premise of it, I think like you, Cenk, I hear you. I too am glad that there are at least literally 3 Republicans who will say treason is bad. Like I'm glad it's not 0, sure, but that doesn't mean we have to put them up on our shoulders and march them around chanting USA, USA because they cleared that very low bar. Like this reminds me of that old Chris Rock bit about people wanting credit for things you just should be doing anyway. It's like, I think treason is bad. It's like, that's what you're supposed to think. What, you want a cookie? You're not supposed to support armed seditionists, it doesn't have, you don't have to effusively praise them just because you're like, oh, well, thank God they're not lunatics, right? Like the rest of them are. Like you said, it's just going out of our way to make them better for some reason. And I just don't see the point in doing that either, in part at least, because like you said, it never happens in the opposite direction ever. So yeah, there's no need for all that. But Jayar asked up top, like, is this a political move? And I mean, I feel like I think it almost has to be, because she's a Texas Democrat, right? So I know from being from the South, a lot of times Southern Democrats, present day Southern Democrats have to be, or at least they feel like they have to do this sort of moderate dance, I guess, and express outwardly being moderate or moderate principles a lot of the time. And I feel like that's probably it's no coincidence that George W. Bush is one of the headliners for her, I don't think, being in Texas. You know what I mean? So like everything all of these people do, it's definitely political in my opinion.
Is it a purple district? Did she barely win last time? I apologize for not knowing the the electoral history of Sheila Jackson Lee and her and reason why maybe she needs to make sure because we talk about Joe Manchin all the time because he knows he's from West Virginia, he's thinking he has to appeal to Republicans in order to keep his seat. Right. I don't know if that's the same situation here.
Yeah, so I unfortunately don't know all the electoral history of Sheila Jackson Lee either. But keep in mind, they could be. I mean, the first thing I thought when I started reading an op-ed is, wait, is she in political trouble? Is that district closer than I realized? But then I also remembered redistricting is coming. And Texas is going to pick up a couple of seats, but that just means that the districts then get redrawn. And so it's possible that she could be redrawn into a different type of district. And so she could be on the lookout for that. But it also could be none of that. It could be that the Democrats have Stockholm syndrome, that they've been beat up so badly by the Republicans for the last 4 decades that they're just constantly begging their captors to be, and to not only to be nice to them, but they've bought into what Trae was talking about. Clearing the lowest bar means they're godlike. Like, a Republican said you shouldn't lie brazenly all the time and shouldn't hate America and shouldn't try to hate everybody else that doesn't look like you. Wait, that's amazing. I told you our captors are amazing. I knew there was a reason why we all, as corporate Democrats, were kissing Republican ass. Now, but Sheila Jackson Lee is a little different, right? I don't know that it's fair to call her a corporate Democrat. And so that one's a really complicated situation. And so it is very hard for us to divine why she wrote it. So let me just address finally the way I would have written it, okay? And so if I wanted to make the same point, and I'm tempted to make the same point, and I've made a shorter version of it on Twitter for Liz Cheney, you've got to give the other side. So you're writing an op-ed and you could say, hey, listen, Mitt Romney is a corporatist through and through, and there isn't a single corporate proposal that he hasn't fallen in love with in his entire political career, but kudos to him on this, right? You could say George W. Bush, his presidency was arguably worse than Trump's, got hundreds of thousands of innocent civilians killed in a war I voted against, right? And we were right and George Bush was wrong, and George Bush handled Katrina terribly, and he crashed the economy just like Trump did, and he was awful in every way, but I appreciate his courage in this instance, and we always welcome that. And finally on the Cheneys, you could say, well, look, you could argue that the Cheneys invented lying in modern day politics, certainly in our generation. WMD, anyone? You want to talk about lies? Dick Cheney, her father, connected Iraq to Al-Qaeda, which was a grotesque lie. And as 7 out of 10 Americans believe that Saddam Hussein had personally attacked us because of Cheney's lies. And Liz Cheney, of course, has defended her dad on that 1,000%, is an incredible warmonger. And that's what I pointed out on Twitter, like, hey, Liz, great to have you on the right side here. But let's note that the Cheneys have been incredible liars in American politics. And I think that what's bothering all three of us at our core is that the mainstream media and most of the Democratic Party not only pardons all those past crimes, but has collective amnesia about them. Like they don't even remember those crimes. All they remember is all the kudos that they want to give to them today.
It's true, and
Yeah, and I think
there's crimes. There's things that Republicans will be mad about that Democrats didn't do that they'll continue to perpetuate from now on. You'll be like, remember that one time? No, actually, I remember you guys talking about that thing that one time, but it was never the truth. But that will get perpetuated. But for some reason, the reality gets forgotten within a week of things. And this is one of those instances where it helps that happen, whether she meant to or not. And I'm sorry, one last thing, Trae. So she wrote this. You can go on any cable news program and talk about this with anyone. I'm sure cable broadcasts would love to have a well-known congresswoman on. But there's something about writing it and keeping it on the permanent record that she wanted to have here. And I'm not sure, again, I don't know the reasons behind it, what the political thoughts behind doing this are, but it's calculated, you do it for a reason.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, Cenk said earlier they, maybe the Democrats have Stockholm syndrome from getting whipped up on for so long, which I agree with. But it's also weird to me how they seem to have taken none of the real winning strategies away from the, getting whipped up on for so long. You know what I mean? Like, do what they do. Like, take the gloves off, man. Like, put your boot on their throat and call it like you see it. When they do something dumb or bad, make it a point to call that out. I don't know how they look at the Republicans' strategy over the years, and the takeaway from that is, olive branches all the time. Like, well, we'll try to meet in the middle. It's like, for what makes you think that is going to be effective? What about the last 20 plus years makes you think that is going to work? Like, yeah. So why are you wasting time on that?
Nah, you know what? It's almost definitely political. I decided in the middle of this segment because at a bare minimum, you have to mention the treachery of all of the other Republicans. At a bare, even if you're not going to go in the past on Cheney and Bush, et cetera, you got to say, now remember, this is in contrast to how craven and cowardly and awful and despicable the rest of the Republican Party has been. But she didn't really do that. It was just a big bouquet of flowers to the Republican Party, and that's at a minimum the wrong political strategy, and it's deeply frustrating to those of us that actually would like to fight the Republican Party because they are actually awful and despicable. Thanks for watching the Young Turks. We really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, Jayar. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.